Guys, I want to issue a formal apology about what I said in the last video. I know I said I would put out the bookshelf tour, this posting, and I didn't. And I'm really disappointed in myself, and I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. It'll come out later. Don't be that worried about it. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to our 2023 year in review video. I've tried recording this video 3 times. This is the 3rd time I'm recording it. I got some really great footage of my computer and doing the tier list that I'm gonna show you, but everything else kinda fell apart. I forgot to plug my mic in. So, this is gonna probably seem a little bit more chaotic than I intended it to be. It happens. I'm trying to have a little bit of grace with myself, so no worries whatsoever. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk about some of my 2023 stats, and then I'm going to give you guys a recommendation tier list of like, here's how much I recommend this to you guys. We're not really going to be talking about stars. Like, I don't want to do like, this is my 5-star tier, this is my 4-star tier, so on. Especially because there were some books that I might have given lower stars even though I really, really enjoyed the book, or there were some I gave 5 stars, but I'm not sure I'd recommend it to everybody. So that'll be most of the video in a few minutes, but first I'm going to give you some of my stat. In 2023, I read 188 books. I went a little crazy apparently. I did not mean to, but here we are, so it's okay. But in those 188 books, I read 5 audiobooks. So when I say that, if my time is a little off, it's because of those. The pages I read in 2023, 69,250 pages. Over 575 hours. 575 hours is almost 24 days straight. I feel like I need to mention that to you guys. My average reading speed for 2023 was 129.2 pages an hour. If you thought the 575 hours and 69,000 pages was like a weird number, it's because I read very fast. You're welcome. My best day, I read 1,222 pages and 454 minutes. When we get to the tier list, I will be able to tell you exactly what I was talking about here. So overall, those are my very, very basic stats. But I'm trying to read a few more audiobooks. I've got some other plans. I don't know what I was on this year. I don't know what happened, but this was the year of reading for me. I do not currently have any goals to try and up that. Like, I'm not trying to get 190 or 200 books. My only goal I've really got is 600 hours, which generally probably means I'm gonna read a little bit more. Now we're gonna move on to my tier list that I made. The tiers I have I have 6 tiers. The top tier is Best Boys Everyone Should Read. These are the books that I was very, very happy with. I think every single person I've ever met or will ever meet should read them. The second tier is Really Freaking Good. Now, these are the books that I'm not sure I'd recommend to every single person, but I personally really, really enjoyed them. I think this ends up being one of the bigger categories. The next tier below that is A Nice Afternoon Read. These are just pretty easy books to get through. I enjoyed them generally pretty well. Then we have There's a But. This generally means I feel one way about the book, but ... and there are several different instances. Maybe the story was really dark. Maybe I don't necessarily support the author. We'll see. The tier below that is Head Empty, No Opinions. These are the books I probably don't remember. They did not make a big enough impact on me to be like, I hated this book or I loved this book. And then the bottom tier is yeah, no. These are the ones I did not enjoy so much, personally. No hate to the authors or anything, I just didn't really like them. My first book of the year was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I'm a vampire girly, what can I say? I haven't read Twilight, but I read quite a lot of vampire literature this year. And this was the very first book I read, and I was really impressed by it. It was written by Grady Hendrix, and he is a horror author, and he's got a lot of very different, very interesting prompts. You'll see later in this list, I also read The Final Girls Support Group. I didn't enjoy that one so much, but this one is really, really good. I was happy to pick up a vampire novel and find that I really, really liked it. So this one is definitely gonna go into the really freaking good category. I'm not going to elaborate on all of these books, just the ones that made a bigger impact on me and that I think you guys should or shouldn't read, and I'll explain all of them. Okay, I had to pause my video, and if it looks different than it did, that's why I had to replace the battery. Moving on to the next book, the first best boy of the year. Went to Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. This is the first time I've read the novel. Obviously, I've seen the movie. The movie is iconic. The movie is really, really well done. And it's actually a really good adaptation. So I love this movie. So I decided to read the book, and the book just takes what the movie has already done great and then builds on it. It is really, really good. I would definitely say it's the best boy, and I think every person should read it. It was really, really good. Okay, so up next we have the internet's favorite historical fiction, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This was a reread for me. I have read it before. I think it's really, really good. I think it goes right up in the really freaking good category. So if you haven't read it, go ahead and do so. I really liked it. Our first yeah, no goes to Dante's Inferno. I know it's iconic. I know it's very good. Believe me, I know. I really couldn't get into it. I was trying to read 30 minutes a day, and I would read the absolute bare minimum I would need to and then slam the book shut. I did not like it. I'm sorry. I don't recommend it. The author's long dead, so I don't feel bad in offending him for writing basically a bunch of fan fiction about himself and Aristotle. So that's gonna be our first yeah, no. This is gonna be a scandalous pick. We're talking about The Secret History. I really had no particular thoughts about it. I mean, I had thoughts about it, but then it just dragged on for so long, so this might be a controversial opinion. I think it probably will be. But I also read If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, I believe. And I just liked it. It's a very similar story, and I just liked it so much better. And I'm someone who's pretty well educated in both the classics and in Shakespeare. It said, If We Were Villains said everything that The Secret History needed to say in significantly less pages. So I liked it better. If We Were Villains is gonna go up in a much higher tier than The Secret History, because I was just kind of like, this is dragging on for too long. Okay, so we have Remarkably Bright Creatures. One of my favorite reads of the year. Like, I'm gonna be really honest. One of the main characters is a sentient octopus who helps this woman find her son who's been missing for 30 years, and it's so sweet, and it's super endearing. It's gonna go up in the best boy category because I love it. It's on display on my bookshelf. It was so good. Please read it if you haven't. It was one of my favorite books of the year. We have our first There's a But. Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which I thought the book was very, very good. But there were some parts. One of the main antagonist is wildly transphobic. Several of the things she was saying were making me very... So... My cat is screaming outside the door. I don't know if you heard that. Long story short, I basically would recommend this book, but please read the trigger warnings. It gets very dark very quick. One of my surprise hits that I really like... Come here. She's here. So one of my surprise books that I really, really liked was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice from Murderers. I think it's not right in front of me and the cat's in my lap. Really, really good. One of my favorite mysteries I read this year. I had so much fun reading it. There's a large cast of very diverse characters. All of them are very funny and thorough characters, and I really liked them. It was one of my favorite mysteries of the year. The boy toy. All you need to know is unplanned pregnancy trope. Boo. Ooh, here's a good one. The 100 Years of Lenny and Margot. This book was really, really sweet. I really liked it. It's about an 83-year-old woman, I want to say, and a 17-year-old woman who are both hospitalized for life-ending diseases, and they kind of just get together and tell each other about their life, and they create a painting for every 1 year of their life, so they're trying to create 100 paintings. It was very sweet. I think about this book fairly often, and I read it months ago, so I recommend. Oh my god. The next one is The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. I figured out this plot twist a chapter in, and I didn't like any of the characters. Like, I did not sympathize with any of them in any capacity. So I do not recommend it. I didn't like it. If you did, great. I didn't, for sure. Oh. Stop. One of my favorite new authors that I found this year, I think, was Casey McQuiston. They're not a new author. Let's be very clear. Oh, sorry, I just kicked the camera. They've written 3 books, and I read all 3 of them this year, and I was really impressed by all of them. My personal favorite probably being Red, White, and Royal Blue, but basically they just take tropes that are used quite a bit, and then they add so much life into them. They're such good character writers. A lot of their dialogue they have is very funny. I really liked it. I definitely recommend, if you're gonna read any of them, I recommend reading Red, White, and Royal Blue, which also has a pretty good movie adaptation. Definitely read that, and then I also really liked I Kiss Shara Wheeler. But you'll see all 3 of them are up in those top 2 tiers. Here's probably my worst book of the year. The Guest by Emma Cline. I've heard The Girls was very good, and that cover is beautiful. The Guest cover, I mean. So I saw it in the store, and I bought it because I literally judged a book by its cover, and it was probably my least favorite book of the year. It was just about this girl who kept being destructive and kept screwing everything up, and then just being like, oh, this should work out in my favor. Don't waste your time with that. I didn't like it very much. So, one of my favorite authors of all time is Neil Gaiman. I took the time to read several of his books that I have never read before. One of which was The Graveyard Book, which is severely underrated. I don't know why no one else is talking about this. It's one of his children's books, so maybe that's why no one's talking about it. But it's about an infant who wanders into a graveyard and then is raised by the ghosts there. And it's very Neil Gaiman-y. It is so cute. It is so good. We got another There's a But, Young Mungo. It takes place in the 80s in Ireland, and he is a young queer man. I feel like that's all I really need to elaborate on. It definitely gets dark. Check your trigger warnings. For most books, I would recommend checking your trigger warnings for a lot of books before you pick them up and read them. This one's a good sign of that. That being said, it's a masterpiece. I think it's really good. Very briefly, Medusa's Sisters was one of my favorite books of the year, but same kind of thing as Young Mungo. Medusa is not known for being a happy myth, and the myth of her sisters is also not, and it's a retelling, and it's beautiful. It's like Song of Achilles level beautiful. Definitely check it out, but same deal. Check your trigger warnings before you read it. Cultish was a very interesting book about linguistics and why companies use the same type of language as cults do to recruit you, their following and stuff like that, and to convince you to buy their products. So this was one of my favorite non-fiction books of the year. I totally recommend it. I read Emma for the first time, and I know Austen fans will be like, this is her best work. It was the last one she wrote. I think she wrote it as she was dying and died in the middle of it. It's definitely top 2 for me. I also read Pride and Prejudice recently. I'm not sure if I read it this year. I don't think I did, but I read it recently. And I just love Elizabeth and Darcy. So Emma is definitely a best boy. It definitely goes in the top tier, but it's not my personal favorite, so keep that in mind. And then we have None Shall Sleep / Some Shall Break. I put it just under None Shall Sleep, but it's a series. Both of them are excellent. Some of my favorite reads of the year. They're dark though, which is probably, I don't think I put them in the best boys category because they're dark. But I do recommend anyone who can stomach it, go ahead and read it. It's really, really good. In this footage you can see me bopping back and forth between which tier I should put it in. I don't think there's a big enough but that I have to be like, it needs to go in this category. So I think I put it at the top of really freaking great. I also read the original Percy Jackson series. The TV show's coming out. They just released a new Percy Jackson and the Olympians. If you haven't read it, you should. It's a best boy, easily. I grew up reading it, and it's really, really well done, and all of the characters are so lovable. Right after that, I also read the Heroes of Olympus series. It's not quite on the level of Best Boys with the original series, but it is still very good, and it chronologically makes sense. It's the series right after Percy Jackson and the Olympians, so I believe I put that in the really freaking great category. Separately from Percy Jackson and the Olympians, I wanted to make sure I was only putting it in its original format, but I also read The Chalice of the Gods, which is the newest Percy Jackson and the Olympians book. I loved it. I do think it needs a while to marinate to get up to the Best Boys level. That being said, though, it was really good, and one of the big plot lines was about growing up and just how growing up affects your worldview on stuff, and you neglect to think about some things and stuff like that. The book made me cry because I was just like, I love you. I love you, Percy. I've missed you so much. But it very much is written to the kids who grew up reading it, and now the young adults and teenagers who are reading the newest book. Aw, Hello Beautiful, one of my favorite books of the year. It's very dark. Check your trigger warnings before you read it. I think I toyed the line of whether I wanted to put it in There's a But or Best Boys, because it's a retelling of Little Women, and it's really, really well done. It definitely made me very sympathetic to characters, if maybe I wasn't so sympathetic to them when I read the original book. There are trigger warnings to it. I put it at the very top of There's a But. I read I'm Glad My Mom Died for the first time, and I know that's also an internet favorite. This is definitely going in There's a But. Jeanette McCurdy is an excellent, excellent writer. I would recommend this book to anybody who can stomach a lot of the trigger warnings. So we have Loveless. Alice Oseman was another author that I was recently introduced to this year. I actually have not read Heartstopper yet. I'm waiting until the final volume comes out. Then maybe I'll do a video of me reading all of them, just bam, one go box set. I'm asexual, so I related strongly to Loveless. Alice Oseman wrote this because she is a romantic asexual. So she wanted to put a little bit of representation out there. And it's also one of my favorite books I read this year. It's a best boy. If you don't know anything about the asexual spectrum or a romantic spectrum, this is a really great resource too. It's a fictional work, but there's a lot of education about it. One of the authors that I also discovered this year was TJ Klune. I read 3 of his books this year and then bought 4 more that I have yet to read. But the first one I want to talk about is The House on the Cerulean Sea. It was one of my favorite books of the year. That being said, there is a but. Klune took inspiration from the schools that a lot of Indigenous children were sent to, where some very horrific things happened there. And Klune's exact kind of mindset with it was, well, I can't relate or portray it accurately, so I'm gonna put it in a fantasy book. That's gross. I wouldn't recommend spending money on this book. I really, really liked it. If you have a friend that has it and you want to borrow it, definitely do so. But man, you were one of my favorite authors this year. Don't try and profit off of something that's pretty horrific without at least honestly portraying it. It's a cozy fantasy, so the combination of basing it off of that thing and making it a cozy fantasy is very gross to me. So there's the but. That being said, Under the Whispering Door is definitely gonna go in Best Boys. I thought that was one of my favorite books I read of the year. It's about passing away and kind of what happens after life. Very cute. And then I also read In the Lives of Puppets, which is a modern retelling of Pinocchio, which was surprisingly good. Also, all of these covers are beautiful. I don't know who does your covers, Mr. Klune, but really well done. I really like them. Oh, here's one of my favorite rom-coms of the year, The Summer of Broken Rules. I was surprised by how much I like it. I read rom-coms as kind of palate cleansers after some pretty dark books, but I really liked this one. I thought it had a really cute premise. All of the characters were very fun. I thought it had a good sense of humor. That's one of the few romantic comedy books that's gonna go up on the top tier. So probably the worst example, worst example of There's a But is A Little Life. I think that book is a masterpiece. I gave it 5 stars. It's a lot. I was really struggling to read through it. I'm glad I didn't DNF it because I think it's beautiful and I think it's well done, but it's a lot. So that's definitely like the poster child of the There's a But category. Oh boy. The biggest example of There's a But, or one of the biggest, I guess I just talked about A Little Life. Harry Potter. I reread that for probably the 5th or 6th time, and I think it's a great series, but the but, if you're gonna read it, please get it from your library, or if you want to buy it used. Please, please, please do not give any money to that horrendous person who wrote the series. So if you read Harry Potter, borrow it from a friend, get it from your library. Please don't buy it new. Do not give her any money if you can help it. This is probably also going to be the only time I talk about Harry Potter on this channel. I do not want to do anything that convinces you guys to read this book because J.K. Rowling is a piece of garbage and you should not give her any money. So that's also a really big example of There's a But. The but is she's literally ruining lives. Do not buy anything new from her. I genuinely think the best piece of literature of Gen Z, our generation, is The Hunger Games. It is going in the best boys, easy, no questions asked. I reread the original series this year and read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for the first time. It literally like changed the entire reading scene for our generation. It introduced dystopian literature. I genuinely think in 50 years they're gonna look back and be like, yeah, that was an instant classic. It's a classic now. It was an instant classic. Literal chef's kiss. I love this series so much. I think it deserves all of the praise that it gets. I think Suzanne Collins is an excellent author. It's just so good. If you legitimately haven't read it, please do. The movies are fine, but the books are truly incredible. So please take the time to read that. If you're at all a fan of philosophy, I really recommend How to Think Like a Woman. It is a partial memoir, partial book about philosophy, about 4 women that the argue Reagan Penaluna, I believe, argues are philosophers. Some really interesting women, some really interesting things that they had to say as female philosophers during the time periods that they lived in. And honestly, really well thought out, really well written. It's definitely one I think about fairly often. The best mystery I read this year was Firekeeper's Daughter. Take the time to read that. It's super good. And then we have my favorite book of the year, my favorite non-reread book, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. It rewrote my entire brain chemistry. So good. It's a retelling of David Copperfield, set in modern day Appalachia, however you want to say that. I'm roughly from Appalachian area, so I say Appalachia. This one is one that I kind of was thinking about, should I put it in There's a But? Because there is a lot about the opioid crisis that goes on there. It is so good though. It is one of the best character studies I've ever read. Demon feels like the most fleshed out character on a page. Like he literally feels like he could just jump up and walk right off the page. It is so good. Ugh, I can't stop thinking about it. I read this in the middle of the year. I want to say I read this in June or July, and I still think about it probably every single day. I recommend everybody read this, but also check your trigger warnings. And the best fantasy I read this year, Priory of the Orange Tree. That's probably some of the best world building I've ever read in a single book. All the plot lines are very interesting. You're looking at different aspects. You're looking at the political scene. You're looking at all sorts of things. It is so well done. It's a hefty book, but every minute of it was worth it. I enjoyed it so much. And then I read Perks of Being a Wallflower. The movie is great, the book is better. That's really all I have to say about it. So, a series I've never read before is The Lunar Chronicles. So the first book in the series is Cinder. It's a sci-fi fantasy series. This series was the one responsible for me reading 1,200 pages and like 450 minutes in one day, because I just picked up like 4 of them in one go and went bam, 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 bam. Such interesting retellings, and I was so invested. Like, I read one book and then I had to wait, and I bought all of them all in one go because I was like, I know this series is gonna be a banger. We're just going all in one row. Babel, or Babel, however you want to say, by R.F. Kuang. Definitely a top book of the year. It was one of those books where I read it and I was like, this is an incredibly smart author. She did such a good job on her research. It's obviously a critique of colonization and racism in the academic scene. It is so good. It's also a hefty one, but it touches on a lot of things that are really, really important that not a lot of literature does as often as maybe it should. That's definitely one that I would recommend. Light from Uncommon Stars. This one is crazy. There's a lot going on in this. There's a demon storyline, there's alien storylines. It kept me on my toes all the way through, but it was such an endearing book that I just loved it. It's not one I think about so often, which is probably why I'm not gonna put it up in Best Boys. But it definitely is really freaking good. It just might not be everybody's cup of tea because of a lot of those storylines. Oh boy. One of my least favorite reads of the year. Definitely the most disappointing. Fourth Wing. Where I would realistically like to put Fourth Wing is, yeah, no. Because that's where it sat for me. I don't recommend it. But there's also an aspect of, there's a but. And that author steals a lot of Gaelic phrases and names and stuff like that, and then kind of just completely disrespects them, like doesn't even learn how to pronounce them, and that's just so disrespectful. Stealing parts of a language that is actively dying and then not even taking the time to pronounce it correctly is really gross. There's the big but of that, but I also just didn't like it anyway. I didn't think it was a well-written story. It wasn't for me! Here are my 2 classics that I think every single person should read. Frankenstein, of course, by Mary Shelley, written by a 19-year-old girl who just created science fiction? Okay. And of course, my best friend Dracula. I love this book. I talked about it in my last video. I don't need to elaborate anymore, but if you're gonna read any 2 classics, these are the 2 you should read. They're so good. Ugh. Chef's kiss. There's a reason these are classics. Catch-22 is really freaking good too. Alright. So, that was my tier list. If you saw anything on there that you were like, oh my gosh, I have to know more about this book. I wonder why she put it in that tier. Go ahead and leave it down in a comment. I will be happy to explain my reasoning on any of these. I mostly just wanted to talk about the ones that made a big impact or that had been talked about a lot on the internet. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know I had fun making it, even though everything was falling apart. If you have any recommendations for me to read this year, like if you didn't see something on this list that you're like, dang, that was a really big book last year, she should read it, please let me know. Comment down below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if any of my videos are interesting to you. I hope you all have an excellent day. I hope you complete all your reading you want to complete for the week, and go visit your local library. All right, I'll see you all later. Bye!